At a local card show, Ben overheard two collectors arguing. "Why waste money on vintage?" one sneered. "Modern is the future." The other shook his head. "Vintage has history. Modern is just hype." Ben chuckled to himself. He had been on both sides before, dismissing others' collections because they weren't his thing. But then he started listening, really listening. He'd learned about the history of forgotten legends and the thrill of prospecting rookies, the art of niche collecting. Every collector had a story, and the more he listened, the more he realized how much he had been missing.
Ridiculous fondling cardboard.
What is up, and welcome to Fondling Cardboard. I'm your host, Mike Lakusta, aka the Golf Card Collector. This is the 12 Rules for Hobby series, where I take the powerful lessons from Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life and break them down, helping you become a better collector and, more importantly, a better version of yourself, both in the hobby and in life. Last week's episode, we talked about rule number 2, which was comparing yourself to who you were yesterday, not someone else today. And today we're actually going to be stepping away from a trend from the first 2 rules, which was almost searching for confidence and not comparing yourself to others, into being wary not to be too full of yourself, and to remember that we are not in a position of judgment. And that brings us to rule number 3, listen without judgment. In the story I shared at the beginning of the episode, Ben is witnessing 2 people who aren't listening, and all they can do is judge each other's preconceptions without actually thinking things through. And the only way you would be able to think through a concept is to actually listen and absorb the information. I don't know about you, but whenever I see a sports card enthusiast on social media or whatever talk about flipping and making money and putting cash on the table, it's all very cringeworthy. And without actually listening too deeply, I immediately judge what's going on. And in some ways, that's how I approached or how I felt at first when I saw some of my friend Paul Hickey's content. Because his whole mission is to help you make money flipping sports cards. But once I actually had some deep conversations with Paul, I realized it's okay for us to approach this hobby in a different way, and we're actually able to connect on a very deep level when we take the time to sit and listen without judgment. In this hobby, it's easy to believe that I have all the answers, or for you to think you have all the answers, whether it's grading or what the value of a card is or which players are worth collecting or investing in. But the moment you assume that you already know everything, you stop learning. And every collector, no matter how experienced, can learn something from someone else. The power of listening in the hobby can come in so many different ways. In dealers and sellers, they've seen the market trends and can share insights on the pricing or evaluating the condition of a card, or even just the history as somebody who works in the hobby. Older collectors have lived through different eras of the hobby, and they can offer perspectives that aren't on YouTube or Instagram, or at least won't pop up at the top of your feed. New collectors bring a fresh enthusiasm and can introduce you to new trends you might be ignoring, or even just a refreshing way of looking at the hobby, and bring you back to the enthusiasm and excitement you had when you first began. Even scammers and flippers can teach you. By listening, you can learn what not to do and how to protect yourself. There's an ego problem in this hobby. Why do we struggle to listen? Many collectors like to show off knowledge rather than absorb it. And hopefully, when I'm giving these talks on this 12 Rules for Hobby series, I don't seem like I'm on a soapbox preaching. Because If I do that, then my pride is getting in the way. And I admit, I don't know a lot of things, and that can make me feel uncomfortable. But what helps me is that knowing even the smartest collectors in this hobby are sponges. They soak up information and they adapt. And that's one of my goals and one of the first missions that I had when I started the Fondling Cardboard podcast. A friend of mine asked me recently, he said he was interested in starting a YouTube channel. He asked me for some advice. And the first thing that came to my mind was come up with a goal when you're starting this project. And I had a list of 3 goals, and one of them was to reflect on my participation in the hobby so that I could continue to better myself. And that's why I'm doing this whole series of the 12 rules for hobby. To learn, to grow, and to adapt. There are practical strategies that I've formulated to help be a better listener, specifically in the hobby. And the first one is to ask good questions. And when I bring guests on the show, that's what I strive to do. I try to put in pre-show preparation and share notes with my guest so that instead of knowing what value that this guest can provide, if I can find the right questions, then during those conversations, I'm going to learn in the moment. Something I really do struggle with, though, is listening more than I talk. And as a host and an interviewer, that's a problem. For you in the hobby, going to shows or chatting in hobby group chats or even just chatting with a friend, resist the urge to jump in with your own opinion, because otherwise you're not going to see what others have to say first. Something that I like to think that I added to the Sports Card Strategy Show and that Paul has added to Fondling Cardboard is challenging each of our own assumptions. Just because I don't like a certain approach to the hobby or even just a particular type of card doesn't mean it doesn't have value, and vice versa. It's important whether or not you choose to follow their path just to find out why others collect. In life, people who listen build better relationships, both in the hobby and in life. In business, sales, negotiations, the best deals go to the best listeners. And in your personal relationships, truly hearing people leads to deeper connections. The more you listen, the more knowledge and wisdom you collect, just like cards. So I'll leave you with this. The best collectors aren't just those with the biggest collections. They're the ones with the biggest curiosity. Hope you're enjoying the 12 Rules for Hobby series. Stay tuned tomorrow for rule number 4.
Ridiculous golf card collector.